Today we're going to do some additional notes for section 113 and 114. And so in this particular section, we are going to continue the work that we started in the earlier video, but we're going to look at some inversely proportional relationships. So to start off with example 1, we have the height of a particular type of cylinder is double the radius. So here I want to make a note that the height is double the radius. And so it says answer the following for that type of cylinder. They want us to express the volume of a cylinder as a function of the radius, which means solve for r. And so we've got volume equals pi r squared h. So I'm going to replace the h with 2r. And so now I can just multiply all this together. So we get volume equals 2 pi r cubed. And so now to solve for the r by itself, I need to divide by the 2 pi, and then to get rid of the cubed, we need to cube root. So my function of r would be r equals the cube root of the volume divided by 2 pi. Biggest thing to remember when we put those types of things into our calculator is to make sure that when you enter a fraction like this, that you put this 2 pi in parentheses. So now when we look at the volume of our cylinder whose radius is 8 feet, and then it says to use appropriate units. So I'm going to use my volume formula and plug in 8 for the radius. And so when I plug all that in, I'm going to leave my answer in terms of pi. I get 1,024 pi feet cubed. If you put this into your calculator, you end up getting 3,216.991 cubic feet. If the volume of the cylinder is 909, then it says what is the height of that cylinder. So now they've given me V, and they want to know the height. So if I know V and I need to know what R is, I can use that formula up here to help me pick what the radius is, and then we can just double that radius to get our height. So in this particular one, I'm going to start with this equation, R equals cube root, and this time I'm going to replace the V with 909 and divide by 2 pi. Now again, in your calculator, remember you're going to need to put this in parentheses. So everybody try putting this into your calculator. Cube root of 909 divided by parentheses 2 pi. And I get an R of 5.2496. But this question asked me for what the height of the cylinder was. And so for the height, we have to double that radius. So we get 10.499 feet. So now part D says, what is a reasonable domain and range if we know that the diameter can never be larger than 12 feet? So our formula is all written in terms of the radius. So here, making a note that the radius is 6. That's the largest it could be. And so then our reasonable domain would be what are the most reasonable radii I could plug in? Well, I can plug in anything from 0 to 6. If I'm going from 0 to 6, if I can't include 0, because if I include 0, then I don't have a cylinder. I have a 0 radius. That means no cylinder even exists. So I can't include the 0. I can include the 6. When I'm looking at the range then, I'm looking at what are the possible volumes that I could get. So I just need to include my 0 and my 6. So if I plugged in 0, I would have no cylinder. So I would have 0 cylinder. But then if I had a radius of 6, what's the maximum volume that I could actually have? So plug in 6 to our volume equation, which leaves me with a range of 0 to 432 pi. So again, I'm not going to include the 0 because that's a non-existent cylinder, but 432 pi would be our maximum value for our cylinder. So on this next one, we're going to talk about what does inversely proportional mean. And when we look at inversely proportional relationships, we're talking about as x increases, then y decreases. So we're looking for relationships where as x gets bigger, our y value gets smaller. And so in this example, it says if 4 people can complete a task in 3 hours, how long will it take 6 people to complete the same task if everyone works at the same rate? So inversely proportional is going to be written in this form always. Y equals k over x. And k is some constant that we're going to have to solve for. So this particular one is inversely proportional because as the number of people increases, then the time to complete our task is going to decrease. So in part B, it says, how long will it take for 6 people to complete the same task if the time it takes to complete the task is inversely proportional to the number of people working? So if I were to think about this as a relationship, I would say the hours worked were inversely proportional to the number of people. And so given my original scenario, it said there were 4 people and it took them 3 hours. So if I plugged those in, I would say 3 hours for 4 people. That gives me a k value then times 4 of 12. So now I've got my equation, h equals 12 over p. So this is now my relationship with my constant 12. So to answer this question, it says, how long will it take? So how many hours will it take if I have 6 people working on the task? So if I have 6 people, then it's going to take me 2 hours to complete the task. So in part C, it says how many people are needed to complete the task in half an hour. So if they had all the resources available to them and they said, we need this done in a half an hour. So now my time is half an hour. We know our constant is 12, and we want to know how many people. So I can cross multiply. 1 times p is p, and 2 times 12 is 24. So I would need 24 people in order to complete that task in half an hour.
Thank you all for your patience.
All right, so example 3. It says the force in newtons exerted by a magnet on a metal object is inversely proportional. So I know I'm going to have a force that is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. So the square of the distance. So now I've got my relationship written down, and it gives me a scenario. It says if a magnet exerts 60 newtons, so that's my force, on a metal object 2 centimeters away, so there's my distance, then what would the distance be when the force is 10 newtons? So first I need to use this initial condition to help me figure out what is my k value. So they told me the force was 60 and my distance was 2. 2 squared is 4 times 60 gives me a k value of 240. So now I've got my formula with my constant 240. And now I can use that to answer the final question. So it said, what will the distance be? So I need to solve for D when the force was 10 newtons. So I'm going to put 10 equals 240 over D squared. I can multiply by D squared on both sides, and then divide by 10, divide by 10. So we end up getting D squared equals 24. So to undo squaring, we square root, And we get plus or minus the square root of 24, but because we can't do a negative distance, we're going to just assume the positive one here. So we get the square root of 24 centimeters. All right, last but not least, so I've given you a table, and we're going to use that inverse proportional relationship, so y equals k over x, to solve this relationship. It says first find the constant of proportionality. That's that k value. And let's write our equation of the inverse proportion. So in order to do that, I need an x and a y value. I can see on my table I've got this one and I've got this one. It doesn't matter which one you pick. You can pick either one. I'm going to go with the first one, so 8 and 1.275. So my y value was 1.275. And my x value was 8. And so to solve that for k, multiply those two together, and I get a k value of 10.2. So my inverse proportion relationship is y equals 10.2 over x. Now I'm going to use that relationship to solve for, and I'll change my color here, I need to find this box and this box. These are both x values. And then I need to find this box, which is a y value. So I'm going to start with the y value. I want to know the y value. I know that my k is 10.2, and I know my x is 10. So 10.2 divided by 10, I get a y value of 1.02. So I can fill in this box with 1.02. Now my two other boxes, I'm solving for x. So this first one, they're telling me the y value is 0.85. I know my k value is 10.2, and I want to know what x is. So multiply by x and then divide by 0.85. So I get x equals 12. And so we put 12 in this box. Last but not least, they tell me the y value is 2.04. And I want to know the x value, the k value is 10.2. So multiply by x, divide by 2.04. And we get x equals 5.